I'm Matt.
I'm Kerry.
We are the Stagmer brothers, a Baltimore knife and sword. We're going to be building some of your favorite weapons, and some weapons that you've never seen before.
This is Man-at-Arms, Reforged. Returning to the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, we'll be making Orcrist, a sword so iconic that even goblins recognize it on sight.
I know that sword! It is the goblin cleaver!
For Orcrist from the Hobbit, we chose to use this quarry jackhammer bit. This is the closest we can get to the Mines of Moria and the trade between the Elven and the Dwarven kingdoms as described in the Silmarillion. This is way too much material for Orcrist, so what I'll have to do is heat it up, make it a more comfortable shape to hold with tongs, cut off about half of it, and start forging out the blade.
You can see now that Ilya has forged a little nub to get more leverage with better tongs. He's now drawing the blade out. It's gonna be a little while doing this process. He's starting from a very large piece of round stock. We gotta draw it out to that very thin, slicing, swift cutting blade. You can see the profile of the blade is not to its complete width at this point. The reason for that is he's going to do a massive amount of hand beveling on that edge to create a really swift and thin striking edge. During the last step of this stage, Ilya is using some water and spraying it on the dies and his blade. It is very effective in removing the scale off the surface, leaving you with a nice clean area to then begin your beveling.
Beveling sets up the geometry to later on be completed by the grinder and the polisher. When hand beveling, the sword has to be slightly angled from the anvil. That creates a symmetric bevel.
Alright, got our blade back from forging. Ilya did a great job. Forged this bad boy in record time. Did a lot of the shaping by hand with the hammer. All I gotta do is go in, do a slight bit of profiling, and then I'm gonna add my deep hollow edge and the slightly hollowed spine. You'll notice that I'm grinding this blade at about a 45-degree angle. The reason for this is the original sword from the movie had a really big hollow grind on a much larger radius wheel that I don't have. So to compensate, I'm doing it at an angle which increases my radius and gives us the desired look. Still got some more refining of the shape to do after heat treat, but right now we're ready to get it heat treated.
Ilya brings the blade up to 1500 degrees and then quenches it in oil.
After the quench, I have about 10 seconds where I can straighten out the blade while it's still between 500 and 800 degrees. After the quench, I stick the blade vertically in the vise. We found out that sticking the blade vertically in the vise evens out the forces acting on the blade while it's cooling off and reduces warping. Now, to keep up with the Mines of Moria theme, we took these two pieces of wrought iron. These actually came from a coal mine shaft somewhere in Maryland here, and Kerry has been storing them for a while. So this is going to become the guard for Orcrist.
It's now time to begin the grinding on the guard. I'm just going to clean up the perimeter and leave the sides nice and flat so Kerry can clamp it in the vise on the mill and put in our slot. One of the things you'll notice when you see me grinding some wrought iron is the sparks change a lot. They'll go from yellow to orange to the big breaky ones to just tiny little sparks. Reason being is wrought iron has tons of impurities in it. So you'll get high carbon, low carbon, pure iron, all kinds of different bits in there. So it's kind of cool to watch, and when you get done your piece and you etch it, it brings out all those different pieces and leaves you with a really beautiful pattern.
So Matt and Ilya forged the wrought iron guard out for me for the sword. I'm going to put a deep slot through it. This is primarily just the main slot for the tang to go through.
Alright, I started grinding on the pommel for Orcrist here. Pretty tricky. I'm working from a solid block of wrought iron that Ilya forged. I don't believe the one in the movie was ever made from a block of steel. Probably was done in wax and then cast. I gotta get a slot up the middle. I gotta get some slots and some holes in the side. The dragon's tooth handle comes up through here and sticks through. I'll do a lot of that on the mill, but I gotta get my rough shape ground in, which I'm gonna finish now.
For the sculpting on this handle, we've brought in our good friend Ferenc Gregor.
Okay, working on the build for the Orcrist sword. The original sword is done with the dragon's tooth for the handle. We're gonna approach this from the opposite end and use a couple of 1,000-year-old walrus usic, which is a penal bone, also known as a baculum. This is a very hard piece of material. They've been used as clubs from a lot of primitive tribes. Okay, now that we've got this buffed up, that's gonna seal the surface, give it a really nice finish and bring out the coloration. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start carving in the serrations. The carving work that we're doing on these pieces, when we're working in bone and the fossil ivories and such, we're using tungsten and steel cutting bits. Very sharp, very aggressive. The stylization of these serrations on the original is done in what's called like a half moon style. So we're going to use the edge of the bit and we're going to go ahead and repeat that half moon scalloping all the way down. Okay, now that we've got the serrations cut, what we've done is we've blackened the wheel a little bit, ran a final buff over there just to bring out some of that detailing, and now we have the completed dragon's tooth for the Orcrist sword.
So one of the more difficult aspects of this sword looks like one of the simpler ones, and that's fitting the pommel on the end of our dragon's tooth. We've welded a piece on here so that we can squarely clamp it in the milling machine, grabbed it, drilled a hole, machined out the inner area. Now I'm gonna have to drill down from the bottom and begin to get this organic shape fitted tightly up into the iron piece. And then everything else will be hand die file work or die grinder work.
Matt uses a die grinder to grind the internal shape of the pommel to match the handle.
I gotta make this chunky pommel that had just a straight hole drilled through it fit a really organic shape. Being really careful to check my work as I go, just take as little material off as possible.
Ilya engraves the design into the backside of the pommel. The center of this design will be set with white sapphires.
Having to actually make Orcrist gave me a new appreciation for the subtle details and minor transitions, variations of form that Peter Line, the original designer of the swords for Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, has placed into his work.
Matt now drills out the handle so that the tang will fit up inside.
So Ilya has chased the pommel handle, the square design, and I have drilled the holes and made the seats for setting the stone. We're going to do what's called bead setting. So I'm going to take an engraver and I'm going to engrave a small line of metal up and not cut it out completely, and then I'm going to roll it over the top of the stone and burnish it over to make a little bead on the top, hence the name bead setting.
It's a fine blade, indeed. So we've got our blade back from heat treating and tempering. It's now time to begin the final grinding. I have two goals. One, to make it nice and shiny and sharp. And 2, I gotta bring in the perimeter of this blade just a tad. We left it a little beefy for heat treating, just to play it on the safe side to prevent any warping that could happen. Last night I did a whole bunch of sculpting on this guard. It was a real challenge trying to mimic Peter Lyon's work once again. He has a lot of different little wheels that I just don't have, so I really had to get in there, use the edge of the wheels, kind of do a little freehand grinding. I'm gonna go ahead and Scotch-Brite the surfaces and then we'll go to the etch.
Ilya lays out the design for the etching.
I'm using an electro-etcher to produce the design. An electro-etcher uses the electrical current to break down water and salt into positively charged ions, cations, and negatively charged ions, anions. Because my blade is attached to the electrode, it is positively charged, and my sponge is negatively charged. As a result, positively charged iron particles get stuck in the sponge. As a result, we're inducing an electrical form of erosion. Normally, this would have been done with acid. However, I do not want to submerge the entire blade covered with the resist into acid.
Well, hello. I didn't see you there. Don't mind me, I'm just rubbing my wrought iron.
All right, now that we have our guard and our pommel completed, the last thing I want to do is do a quick etch on both pieces. We did forge them out of wrought iron after all, so it'd be kind of a shame not to etch and show that beautiful pattern.
Click here to subscribe, or click here to watch more episodes. Thanks for watching Man-at-Arms Reforged. We need to know what you want the guys to build, so tell us in the comments below what weapons you want to see next.